Hi, I'm Yan Chen. I just went through my very first election. I wanted to tell you my story about this election from the angle of voter turnout. Let me first start by telling you a little bit about why I wanted to get into politics. In 2017, I developed ideas to address climate change by providing solutions for people living in the countryside and the cities. But to carry out this vision, I knew I had to approach it politically. But as a person who hasn't been involved in any party politics, I did not know how to approach this subject until 2021. In 2021, I was inundated with property crime when I was cleaning up one of my rental properties to the level that I became fearful. I thought this was a super unhealthy attitude, and nobody should live in fear if we decided to live together as a community. I decided to run for city council to reduce crime. Since I knew nothing about the local politics, I decided to learn how the city works by studying the city budget. What I saw in the budget was worrisome and was not sustainable for the long-term health of our city. Our city hasn't developed the ability to generate revenues from its resources, but has become more reliant on property tax. Based on the budget, I decided on my platform in 2022. I took my message and knocked on all the doors in Ward 1 in 2023. It was important to me to check out every corner of the ward, whether they are the voters or not. My message overall resonated well with the voters. What I saw in the budget was what the people experienced on the ground. However, there is one particular group of people I had to change my message when I talked to them. I can understand this group very much. They care about the climate and how the society is going. They're willing to pay with their tax dollars to make it work. It was not hard for me to talk to them in person because I was one of them. But I didn't pivot my message towards them because I thought they didn't represent the majority of voters. This became even clearer right before the election when I pleaded with voters to vote no to the sales tax increase. I got a strong pushback, and they asked me why I didn't care about the infrastructure. At that moment, I knew I didn't frame my message right. I needed to say that a thriving city is the quickest way to reducing carbon footprint, since a city is the best way to organize and distribute resources. Money alone cannot solve problems. In fact, money can hide problems. Our city leaders have to put more effort into financial planning. So, you can imagine my disappointment when I saw our city vote 60 to 40 for the sales tax increase. In my opinion, the sales tax increase made our city losing competitiveness with surrounding cities. My first question when I saw the result was who voted in this election? Because I knew the people I talked to in the ward wouldn't vote 60 to 40 in favor of a sales tax increase. I decided to research who typically votes in a local election. What I found was quite interesting, and I would like to share my finding with you by discussing our voter turnout from different elections in our city and how to judge a good voter turnout. I will give you my analysis of why the low voter turnout and what will turn out voter in a local elections. First, as you might know, the ward boundary is drawn in a way to ensure every ward has a similar population across the city. However, it turns out that the number of registered voters is not identical across the wards since kids and immigrants cannot vote. Overall, in Ward 3, we have the highest number of registered voters. Suppose you compare the number of registered voters and the number of people who voted in the presidential election. In that case, Ward 4 has the highest voter turnout since their registered voters are almost the same as the actual votes cast. What are the other demographics of Ward 4? Young college kids, right? Therefore, this data shows that the college kids participate in the presidential elections. But overall, regardless of the demographics of the ward, if people register to vote, they were very likely to vote in a presidential election. Now, I took the previous data and replotted it into percentage of voter turnout. As expected, Ward 4 has the highest voter turnout. Let's look at the voter turnout for another type of election, gubernatorial election. Immediately, two things are already standing out. One, there is a ward-to-ward variation. For example, the percentage of voter turnout in Ward 4 dropped more than in Ward 3. Ward 6 dropped the most among all the wards. 2. There is also an average drop. Even in Ward 3, it dropped by 20 percentage points. The average drop is really interesting because it suggests that demographics is not the only factor behind the change. There is a correlated force behind the drop, and every ward experiences it. Now, once we start to examine another election, the city council election, the average drop became the predominant force, and the average voter turnout reducing from 60% in the gubernatorial election to 20% in the city council election. Here, the word-to-word variations is even less essential, but the correlated force has become more critical since we're talking about 40% of the drop. So, what is the correlated force behind the drop? Let's figure it out by examining our local election in more detail. Here is all the data I can gather from our election website starting from 2001. In the past 22 years, we had 6 city council elections. Among them, 4 of them had no ballot question, while the other 2 had a ballot question. When there is no ballot question, the turnout from city council election was low, with an average of 30,000 voters turn out consistently. This was interesting, since among these 4 elections, there were open seats or incumbent running. Overall, the data suggests that regardless of whether the incumbent were running or not, all voter turnout in the city council election was around 30,000. In the presence of a ballot question, the voter turnout increased by almost a factor of 2. And we will go back to this issue later in the talk again. For mayoral election, as you might know, the voter turnout is high when there is an open seat. In the past 22 years, we had 3 mayoral elections with open seats. Indeed, we had an average of 60,000 voter turnout for these 3 elections. When an incumbent is running, it is known that the voter turnout is low. Indeed, when there are no ballot questions, like in 2013, we had a low voter turnout, almost the same as the city council election, around 30,000. When there is a ballot question, voter turnout becomes very interesting. In 2009, when we had a question on ranked choice, we had a low voter turnout, similar to as if there were no ballot question. But in 2021, we had a much stronger voter turnout when the ballot question was about rent control. The voter turnout was almost close to 60,000. This data suggests that ballot questions mattered. When the question was about the ranked choice, voters did not know what to make from it, since it was a new concept. There was almost no additional voter turnout due to the ballot question. When the question was on rent stabilization, voters had more experience, since it has been used as a tool in many cities since 1920. voters came out to vote when they had a clear opinion about it. This result almost suggests that some voters wouldn't come out to vote if they couldn't decide. But what is a good voter turnout? Is 60,000 voter turnout a good number? I think the best way to approach this is to examine the election I just went through. In our ward, we had a total 8 candidates. With 80 to 90% confidence, I can say people who voted for Anika, Uma, and Sus also voted for a sales tax increase. If you tabulated their votes, you came up with around 4,000 yes votes. The remaining will be no votes, about 2,500. Using percentage, we came to almost the same percentages that voted for the sales tax increase in our ward, in our city. When I saw the result, I knew exactly what I had done wrong. How did I know that? Well, I saw Travis only got 4% of votes. Now, Travis was a Republican-endorsed candidate. By examining St. Paul's presidential election result, I know St. Paul has 20% Republican voters. Because Travis only got 4% of votes, I knew Jeff and I were taking Republican votes away from Travis. To me, all the voters mattered. Of course, I appreciated the votes from the Republicans, but it became clear that the voters did not understand my message. So, what was my message? Well, in my opinion, my message is very progressive because they believe everybody should thrive in our city. We need social mobility. But my message also recognizes that our city hasn't done well for many years. We have to examine our city's past mistakes. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to turn our city around. What if I did a good job spreading my message and got my voters? Let's say 2,000 of them. Then our voter turnout will change to 40%, and I have confidence that we will defeat this ballot initiative with the additional 10% voters. Let's examine another election to see how the voter turnout can influence the outcome of a ballot initiative. In 2021 and 23, we had a ballot initiative in both elections. You might first notice why I compared the 2021 mayoral election with the 2023 city council election. Well, the mayoral election in 2021 was run by an incumbent. Since we usually have a low voter turnout when an incumbent is running, around 30,000, it's very similar to the city council election. Therefore, I think these are legitimate comparisons. Then, you might ask, why didn't I use in 2019 city council election, where we also had a ballot question, coordinated the garbage collection, to compare? That ballot question was a tricky one. I'm entirely for coordinated garbage collection. In fact, I wrote a letter to all the city council members and asked them for coordinated garbage collection even before they introduced the legislature. However, after talking to the voters in our ward, I realized that the voters were angry about how badly the garbage contract was negotiated. I would love to volunteer to renegotiate this garbage contract because our current garbage contract is not based on data and should be renegotiated as soon as possible. So, in my opinion, only the ballot question in 2021 and 23 should be defeated because they were not good for the long-term health of our city. But these two questions were passed in two different levels. We had a voter turnout of 36% for the rent control question. And the ballot question was almost defeated by missing 4 percentage points. For the sales tax increase question, we had a voter turnout of 30%, and the ballot question was passed easily by almost 10 percentage points. Here, I wanted to emphasize the importance of the message rather than the voter turnout. I believe defeating these two ballot questions is the right thing to do. If we campaign harder and better, we could spread this message and turn out voters. Consequently, I believe voter turnout has much to do with the clarity of the messages. In St. Paul, a good enough voter turnout seems around 40%. Of course, we should aim for a more democratic voter turnout, such as more than 50%. Our baseline appears to be 20% of dedicated voters. That tells us that we have a deficiency of 70% of voters waiting something for them to come out to vote, as compared to a presidential election. So, what do these 70% voters want, right? I think I can be one of the spokespeople for these 70% voters because I was one of them. I never voted in local election until the past election when I became a candidate. So I had to ask myself, why didn't I vote in the local election before? I didn't vote because I thought our city was doing well. I knew our country hadn't been doing well, but I didn't realize our city also was not doing well. You have to remember why I decided to run for the city council position. It was because I became a target of a repeated crime, first in a very unique circumstance. My rental property was abandoned. I became only aware that St. Paul was not doing well when I started to examine our city budget. Otherwise, I might never have thought about paying attention to the local politics. Another thing I didn't realize was that changes can happen more readily from the ground up. Here was one of the messages I sent to the voters in the past election. Your vote counts as 1 out of 200 million in a general election, but your vote will count as 1 out of 10,000 in our local election. You have more power in this local election to make changes from the ground up. But I also have to ask myself, why I voted in presidential and gubernatorial elections? The answer is simply that there is just more national news. No matter how hard one tries, local news cannot compete with national news by number. National news also have more in-depth coverage and is more entertaining. I want to point out that Jon Stewart pioneered this type of reporting and Stephen Colbert perfected it. They have a team of writers. These writers could go in depth on the news, digging out old footage and highlight the hypocrisy. In a short 30 minutes, the hosts deliver them. We are entertained and educated at the same time. There's just no way we can compete with them by doing the same way with our local news. Even for the gubernatorial election, we have NPR and TV coverage. For the city council election, it is tough for the media to cover so many candidates, and it's equally challenging for the voters to judge the candidates without some sort of shortcuts. Given the complexity of local election, do we have any shortcut? One of the shortcuts suggested and implemented in some cities is to move local elections from odd to even years, since even years have more voter turnout because both presidential and gubernatorial elections are in the even years. After thinking through my voting pattern, I'm firmly against this strategy. You may ask why. I always voted for the county commission election using party endorsement as a shortcut. But in reality, I have no clue what the county responsibilities are, except I know now the county takes a third of the city property tax. If anything, right now, I'm actually for moving county election from even to odd years so that the voters have a better chance to examine our county elected officials without the interference from state or national politics. Let's face it, if there is a shortcut to have more voter turnout in local elections, somebody in the past must have tried. I think it's time for us to using a different approach. First of all, we need more local investigative reporters and also independent funding sources to support them. Here, I would like to tell you my story of interacting with Star Tribune from this past election. On October 25th, Star Tribune published an article explaining why some Paulites pay such a high property tax. When I read this article, although I agreed with what they said, I thought that they didn't provide another angle on St. Paul's budget. I wrote my opinion piece immediately and sent it to them the next day. I didn't hear from them for the 8 days till the Friday before the election when I received a phone call in the morning and was informed that they would publish my opinion piece if I could provide them with my data analysis by 3 p.m. I thought that was great journalism, and I was excited to share my data analysis with them. While, while preparing my data, I received another phone call and was informed that they ran out of space for the publication until after the election. I'm not going to lie, I was angry since I didn't have a microphone to reach out to the people of St. Paul as effectively as the Star Tribune. To me, Star Tribune didn't practice their journalism. Therefore, we need an information ecosystem, provide voters with more data analysis and discussions. We need to nurture voters and allow them to be naturally informed so that they want to vote. Democracy depends on voter turnout, but how to turn out a voter matters. We don't want to trick them, and we don't want to force them to vote. Currently, we can divide our voters into 3 groups. The first group is very dedicated and show up at every election. The second group will only come out to vote if they develop a clear opinion on an issue. The third group so far hasn't voted in any local elections. Our job is first to convince the never local group to vote locally. We also need to inform voters about the local issues and provide more data and data analysis for the voters so that the other 70% of voters will want to vote. Candidates will also play an important role here. I appreciate what the democracy can do for a first-time candidate like me. I didn't know any local politics 2 years ago. Only through democracy was I able to run for this campaign, and I hope in return, I also provide a different angle to approach our city politics. My message might not be crafted perfectly, but I think I made a positive impact on this election by bringing all the candidates to focus on our core services and on our budget. But I made a fatal mistake. I didn't ask for money because I didn't think I was qualified to ask, since I wasn't involved in local politics before. But right before the election, I realized that I couldn't have a good organization if I didn't have money. Without a good organization, I also cannot turn out voters. Therefore, candidate and organization are essential to help build our local information ecosystem. But more importantly, we need to remember what we're fighting for. We need to develop the best governing policies so that our political system can be sustainable in the long term. Usually, when think about our government in terms of its size and importance, the federal government is the biggest and the most important. Then the state government, the local government is smallest and maybe the least important, and inverted the pyramid. By thinking about the governing policy, I realized that we should think about our government in terms of its function. And every government should provide unique, non-overlapping, but crucial functions. Each function should be accountable to the taxpayers. If you think about our country as a tree, our local government is like a tree roots, while voters are like Mother Earth. And a tree will need deep, healthy roots to be long-lasting. I Googled. The longest living tree is 5,000 years old. If each level of government can figure out how to carry out its functions and to do them well while coordinating together like a tree, we can make America a country to last for at least 5,000 years. With this, thank you for your time. And if you like my presentation, please send my presentation to your family and friends who are interested in strengthening our local government for the future of our city.